There are moments in life when a simple act of disrespect can ignite something far greater than anyone expects. On what seemed like just another busy evening at a local restaurant, a young waiter quietly went about his job, serving tables, clearing plates, and wearing a smile that hid the exhaustion underneath. But not everyone noticed his hard work. At one table, a group of wealthy guests, dripping in arrogance, decided to make him the target of their cruel jokes and careless insults. Laughter filled the room, but for the waiter, each word stung a little deeper. Most people might have walked away bitter, defeated, or even broken, but not this waiter. Deep down, he was hiding a story far more powerful than the guests could ever imagine. You see, he wasn't just there to serve. He was quietly studying, planning, and building something that would soon change his life forever. This night, though painful, would become the spark that set everything into motion. As the hours ticked by and the restaurant buzzed with noise and clinking glasses, something was already unfolding behind the scenes, a twist no one at that table could have ever predicted. They thought they were mocking a powerless worker, but in just a few short hours, they would learn the real meaning of success and humility. What happened next would turn the entire restaurant upside down and leave those guests facing a reality they never saw coming. Stay tuned, because you're about to hear the incredible story of how one insulted waiter flipped the script and ended up owning the very place where he was once belittled. The waiter's name was Daniel, and his journey to that restaurant wasn't by accident. Just a few months before, Daniel had lost everything. A small business he had poured his heart into had collapsed under unexpected debts, leaving him with no choice but to start over. With bills piling up and no one willing to give him a second chance, he took the first job he could find, waiting tables at a place he once dreamed of owning someday. Quietly, he worked every shift with a purpose, keeping his dreams tucked away behind his humble smile. The guests who insulted him that night had no idea who Daniel really was. To them, he was just another server, someone to order around, someone invisible. They laughed loudly, demanding attention, criticizing everything from the food to the service, tossing cruel remarks like they meant nothing. But Daniel remembered every word, not out of anger, but out of motivation. He knew that people like them saw the world in two kinds, those who serve and those who are served. He had once believed that too. But now he was determined to prove that hard work and quiet persistence could rewrite anyone's story. What those guests didn't know was that the restaurant was already struggling. Business had been slow for months, and behind the fancy menu and polished floors, the owners were desperate to sell. Daniel had overheard whispers in the kitchen, late-night talks between managers, and spotted the signs no regular customer would ever notice. He didn't say a word. Instead, he kept working, saving, planning. Every plate he carried, every order he took, brought him one step closer to something much bigger than anyone could see. And that night, the opportunity finally arrived. As the night wore on, Daniel noticed the restaurant's owner, Mr. Carlton, pacing nervously near the bar. It wasn't the first time Daniel had caught him looking stressed, but tonight something felt different. Whispers between the senior staff, frantic phone calls, and a constant checking of the front door told Daniel that big changes were coming, and soon. What Daniel didn't know yet was that Mr. Carlton was meeting a potential buyer that very night. Someone who, if the deal went through, would take over the struggling restaurant by morning. Back in the dining room, the same group of wealthy guests continued their show. They ordered the most expensive dishes, barely touched the food, and snapped their fingers for service as if they were royalty. Daniel kept his cool, but inside he was boiling. Every rude comment, every dismissive glance only strengthened his quiet resolve. He knew that real power didn't come from loud voices or fat wallets. It came from patience, strategy, and timing. And Daniel's timing was about to be tested in ways he hadn't imagined. In a quiet corner of the kitchen, Daniel found his friend and co-worker, Maria, wiping down a counter. She had been at the restaurant for years and knew the business inside out. Over shared breaks and late-night shifts, Maria had become a confidant, someone Daniel trusted. Tonight, with the tension building and rumors flying, Maria hinted that Mr. Carlton was willing to sell for less than anyone had guessed, if the right offer came fast enough. Daniel's heart raced. He didn't have much, but he had a plan, and more importantly, he had the determination that the others lacked. The window was small, the risk was huge, and failure would mean starting from nothing again. But deep down, Daniel knew this was his moment, if he was brave enough to take it. Daniel spent the next hour pretending everything was normal, even though his mind was racing. Every time he passed the table of the wealthy guests, he could hear the sharpness in their voices, the careless way they spoke about people beneath them. It fueled him, pushed him to keep going. He glanced over at Mr. Carlton, who was now seated with a man in a sharp suit, the potential buyer. They spoke in hushed tones, both looking worn out, both desperate in their own ways. Daniel wiped his hands on his apron and took a deep breath. If he wanted a chance at saving this place, and himself, he would have to act now. The problem was, Daniel didn't have the full amount the owner was asking. What he did have was a small pool of investors, old friends from his failed business, people who still believed in him. He knew they would back him if he could convince Mr. Carlton tonight. But there was no room for mistakes. One wrong move, and he'd lose the opportunity forever. Meanwhile, back at the troublemaking table, the guests were becoming even more of a scene. They demanded to see the manager, threw out complaints, and insulted the restaurant's reputation in front of everyone. Mr. Carlton's face turned pale. Losing even a handful of high-paying customers could be the final nail in the coffin. Daniel saw the fear in his eyes and realized this wasn't just about money. Mr. Carlton loved the place, but was trapped by bad luck and worse timing. As the night edged closer to closing, the pressure built so heavy it was almost visible. Daniel knew he had just one shot to step forward, to speak, to offer Mr. Carlton a lifeline before the stranger in the suit closed the deal. His palms were sweating, his heart hammered in his chest. Everyone in the restaurant went about their business, unaware that behind the scenes, a decision was about to be made that would change everything. And Daniel, he was ready to gamble it all. Just as Daniel gathered the courage to approach Mr. Carlton, something unexpected happened. The man in the sharp suit stood up, shook Mr. Carlton's hand firmly, and walked toward the exit with a confident smile. It looked like the deal was done. Daniel felt the floor drop from under him. All his plans, all his hopes, slipping away in front of his eyes. For a few seconds, he stood frozen, wondering if he had waited too long. But then Maria rushed over to him, her voice low and urgent. She had overheard something. The man in the suit wasn't planning to save the restaurant. He was going to buy it cheap, gut it, and turn it into a flashy nightclub. Everything Daniel loved about the place, the warmth, the community, the little stories written into its walls, would be wiped away without a second thought. The restaurant would be gone. Mr. Carlton didn't know the full plan, and if Daniel didn't act now, he never would. The stakes had just exploded. It wasn't just about owning a restaurant anymore. It was about preserving a legacy, saving a place that meant something real to the people who worked there, ate there, lived their small moments there. Daniel knew he had to move fast. He couldn't match the cash offer the other buyer had made. Not yet, but he had something more powerful. A promise to keep the heart of the restaurant alive. As Daniel pushed through the swinging doors to the back office, every second felt heavier. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who believed in second chances, for Maria, for the tired kitchen staff, even for the regular customers who didn't know how close they were to losing their favorite place. He didn't know if Mr. Carlton would listen. He didn't know if he was too late. But he was ready to take the risk, even if it meant putting everything he had left on the line. Daniel stepped into the back office just as Mr. Carlton was gathering the final paperwork. For a moment, they just stared at each other. One man tired and ready to give up, the other burning with last-chance determination. Without hesitating, Daniel spoke from the heart. He laid everything out on the table, his plan to revive the restaurant, the investors willing to support him, his passion for keeping the spirit of the place alive. He didn't offer a bigger check, but he offered something Mr. Carlton hadn't heard in a long time: hope. At first, Mr. Carlton shook his head. The other buyer's money was easy, fast, guaranteed. But as Daniel talked, something shifted. Maybe it was the way Daniel described the regulars by name, or how he spoke about the kitchen staff as family, or maybe it was just the truth in his voice. Slowly, Mr. Carlton lowered the pen in his hand and asked one question: "Are you really ready for this?" Without missing a beat, Daniel said yes. In a move that stunned everyone, Mr. Carlton tore up the pending deal and handed Daniel a chance, a smaller down payment, along the timeline, but a real shot at ownership. Cheers broke out quietly among the kitchen staff when they heard the news. Maria hugged Daniel so tightly he almost couldn't breathe. The restaurant was saved, and Daniel, the once insulted waiter, was now the new owner. But just as it seemed the story had found its happy ending, there was one last twist. When the wealthy guests learned the news, they laughed it off, until Daniel calmly approached their table, introduced himself as the new owner, and kindly asked them to leave. Their faces turned from smug to stunned in seconds. That night, they walked out in silence, while Daniel stood tall in the place they once thought he didn't belong. It wasn't just a victory, it was the start of a brand new chapter. After that unforgettable night, everything changed for Daniel. The restaurant, once on the verge of closing, found new life under his leadership. He didn't rush to make it fancy or flashy. Instead, he focused on what had always made it special: good food, honest service, and a place where everyone felt welcome. Slowly, regular customers returned, bringing friends and family. The kitchen buzzed with new energy, the staff worked with pride, and the empty tables started filling up again. Daniel never forgot the journey that brought him there. He treated every customer with the kindness he wished he had received on his hardest days. Even the wealthiest guests, the ones who thought they were better than others, were welcome, but only if they respected the spirit of the place. Word spread quickly about the waiter who became the owner, and soon the restaurant wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Local newspapers ran the story, and people came from nearby towns to see the restaurant that had beaten the odds. Maria became the restaurant's manager, and the rest of the old team found new opportunities as the business grew. Daniel's dream had come true, but it wasn't just about owning a restaurant. It was about proving that respect, hard work, and belief in yourself could change your destiny, no matter how impossible it seemed. In the end, Daniel's story was a reminder to everyone who walked through those doors: never underestimate someone just because of where they are today. Life has a funny way of turning tables when you least expect it, and sometimes the person you look down on could very well be the one you'll look up to tomorrow. Daniel's journey wasn't just about success, it was about rewriting his story one plate at a time.